Sashi perki gyukshig meto Tramri rablingji nihide gyan padi Sange shindu mekte ovagi Rukunam dashing la Chepaksho Jetsu lama dan pakenam Kicha kikala Gense tri Gita sampe dulce sin mala Sapke chuki chapa Vaptu so. And we imagine the Buddha happily accepting our many offers. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nihatsayami.
Sangye chudon sogi chunam la jantu badu dani kapsuchi dagi jinsogi pe sonam ki rola penche sangye drupa sho sangye chudon sogi chunam la jantu badu dani kapsuchi Dagi jinsogi pe sonam ki drola benje sange rupa sho sange churon sogi chunam la jantu padu dani kapsuchi dagi jinsogi pe sonam ki drola benje sange rupa sho. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Um, this is really special to get to do Bodhisattva vows in depth. So I'm really, really glad that you guys requested this. I think, it's easy enough to find books about it and easy enough to read through them, but there's such a heart practice in our life as we deepen our Mahayana practice in particular. It's good to do a bit of a deep dive. And if you don't have these vows, it's completely okay to study them beforehand. In fact, it's really recommended. So whether you already have them or you're thinking about taking them, this is a particular set of vows that is fine to study beforehand. I say that because that's not true of all of the vows in Buddhism. Some of them you need to take and then study, and there's lots of good reasons for that, and you might have heard that around. But for 8 Mahayana precepts and for the Bodhisattva vows, it's completely fine to study them first. So welcome. This particular session, I don't think we'll do any meditation because we're just kind of like figuring out the level of the group and what your level of understanding is. So we're just going to clarify a lot of main points. And then I want to hear from you where your areas of interest are with your Bodhisattva practice, or where you're getting stuck, or where you're curious, and things like that, so I can tweak and tailor the curriculum to really suit you. And then we can be doing some companion meditations in these sessions in the coming weeks. But for today, I think we'll just go through some key points to make sure we're all on the same page. And so my plan is to talk about the reasons for bodhicitta and the bodhisattva vows, the types of bodhicitta, the methods to develop bodhicitta, the bodhisattva vows as practiced in the Tibetan traditions, and then the various sutras related to the bodhisattva vows, sources and approaches and things like that. So that's kind of the rough idea of what I want to go through in this particular series. And also, I want to see if there's things you'd like me to add in, because I'm very happy to. This is an area that I've studied a lot, that I love a lot, and I'm very happy to kind of pivot and tweak it to suit all of you. So just out of curiosity, how many of you already have the Bodhisattva vows? Just 1, 2, 3, 5, maybe half of you? Yeah, about half, a little more than half. That's a nice mix. Yeah, that's a nice mixture. Oh, excellent. And how many of you are card-carrying, self-identified Buddhists? Yes, it's okay if you're not. It's okay if you're not, but just curious. Everybody Buddhist or like Buddhist adjacent? A Buddhist enthusiast at least? Yeah, okay. And if you're just like a, friendly agnostic, ethical atheist, you are also welcome here. So just know that, but just kind of get a sense of everybody here. That's wonderful. All right, so getting into just the basics to make sure we're all on the same page, we need to clarify what the problem is, because otherwise we might not have as much enthusiasm for the solution. So I think that we all know the Four Noble Truths. We all know that there is suffering. We all know that the origin of suffering is karma and disturbing emotions. We know that there is cessation. There is an end to suffering, thank goodness, and there is a path out of it. We know this because we're at a Buddhist center and we're doing a intermediate advanced course. So we know this, but when we really think about our daily life struggles, it is our habit to blame the outside. It is our habit to blame our health or our house or our partner or our job or our government or our environment for how we feel. And it's not to say that those aren't powerful conditions that we should all look at and see if we can address. But despite maybe being Dharma students for quite a long time, there is part of us that is still trying to fix samsara all the way, the outside samsara, not the actual samsara, which is us, right? Um, and it's not to say that we shouldn't be engaged in the world. We absolutely should be engaged in the world. We should vote. We should try to recycle. We should be nice to our neighbors. We should be conscious about these things. But there needs to be some sort of space that acknowledges it will never all come together. The only thing we really have control of is our own mind, and our own mind we're not in total control of. But we have a lot more potential to get it under control than we do to try to control the outside world. So we just kind of need to identify the issue a little bit. So I think most of you know these guys, maybe know them all too well. But the main issue, we call them twin demons, as if they were entities in and of themselves. Of course, they're not. We're not possessed. But we have self-cherishing and self-grasping, and they are removable, thank goodness. But right now, this is why we suffer. All the outside stuff is conditions. It's not the substantial cause. So if we boil down every issue in your life, every disturbance, every anxiety, everything, it boils down to these two. And these two are in an unfortunate relationship with each other where they're mutually reinforcing. So self-cherishing, the deeply ingrained thought that cherishes the welfare of your own self and makes you oblivious to others' well-being. This is one of the twin demons that lie within our heart and serve as the source of all misfortune and downfalls. And then self-grasping is this instinctively believing in the intrinsic existence of your own self, as well as of the external world. So self here means substantial, truly existent entity. The wisdom that realizes emptiness eliminates this self-grasping. So these two thoughts, self-cherishing and self-grasping, are the primary focus of combat in mind training or Lozang practice. And mind training Lozang practice is like the advanced form of ways to develop bodhicitta. So we can be working on Lozang, thought transformation or mind training practices. And in tandem with that, we have our Bodhisattva vows to hold us steady, to create a foundation, to reinforce. So these particular descriptions of self-cherishing and self-grasping are from Geshe Thupten Jinpa from Mind Training, the Great Collection. It's a really beautiful book. You can see it maybe very tiny at the bottom, the reference there. There are a lot of ways of describing these two, but I have a lot of faith and respect for Geshe Jinpa. He's an incredible scholar. He was one of His Holiness's translators for many years. And so his way of summing it up is very accurate. There are, of course, more elaborate debate quality definitions that are more specific, but this gives you a good sense. Now, if those words are a bit too scholastic, here's kind of a, how to say, summary definition. Yeah. So self-cherishing thinks of oneself as primary importance with obliviousness to the impact on others, while simultaneously can be hyper-aware of reputation and is self-conscious in a neurotic way. So self-cherishing is something that we need to be able to locate the way it operates in our own life. Because as nice people, as polite people, as spiritual practitioners, the way it shows up might be very stealthy and very subtle. And it will co-opt our good work. It will take over our bodhisattva practice. And you might start to identify as a bodhisattva already, or identify as a Mahayanist or a Buddhist practitioner with a very strong eye and a very strong kind of obliviousness to your impact on other people because you have too much faith in your good intentions. Yeah. So this can happen with any religion, with any spiritual tradition where you become so fully entangled with terminology and ritual and procedures and protocols and etiquette and what you say in this instance and how you behave in that instance that it might not occur to you that sometimes you need to adjust to suit the audience in front of you. You know, the way that we speak to our family is slightly different to the way that we speak to our friends. The way that we speak to our friends is slightly different than the way we speak to our coworkers. And hopefully we have compassion and goodwill to all of these groups, but we already know that we need to adjust how we communicate given the context. But what can happen is when you're really on a roll with your Dharma practice, when you really have a lot of momentum there, that sometimes we get into like dogmatic Dharma speak. And someone might tell us, oh, I've just had a cancer diagnosis, or I've just had a divorce. And you'll say, oh, yeah, karma. You know, it's like completely missing uh, reading the room and like having compassion in the right context, right? And so what we want is for our bodhicitta practice to have this real flexibility and freshness. Yeah, flexible and fresh that can really meet each person in each situation with what they need in order to progress on their path, that helps elevate them, that creates a strong condition for them. And so to do that, you kind of have to get out of the way of your needs for validation, for good reputation. It sounds strange, right? But like when you're worried about how you seem, then you're not thinking about them. And self-cherishing is why we get so obsessed with how we seem. How do we seem to others? Do we seem smart? Do we seem kind? Do we seem wise? Do we seem old? Do we seem young? Are we out of touch? Are we too radical? How do we seem? It's like, in a way, none of your business, right? How you seem to others is so based on their own filters. And so to try and manipulate people to get them to see you the way you want to be seen is kind of a fruitless practice. And it's exhausting. And it means that all of that energy doesn't go towards trying to get to the deep stuff, trying to really uproot the causes of suffering. And so if you can kind of sit with, what do I over identify with? There are things about ourselves that we should identify, you know, certain personality traits, certain characteristics. These are completely fine to identify. That is a completely different thing than identifying with, because then it gets too solid and it creates this us and them feeling. And so, you know, we might identify as our nationality. And then immediately, when you over-identify as your nationality, there becomes a divisiveness or a suspicion, or in my case, as an American, somewhat embarrassed, right? So, right. So, you know, people used to always think I was Canadian, and I had to always tell them, no, I'm American, and I was so embarrassed. But, you know, the reason I was embarrassed was because of the reputation of the place where I was born and over-identifying with that. Now, of course, it's reasonable to say certain policies are problematic, and I'm doing my best to contribute to the cause. But you know how we get that cringe of don't think I'm one of those. Please don't think I'm one of those. Whatever those are, right? Don't think I'm one of those. So self-cherishing shows up as how we want to be seen. And for a kind, self-aware person, like we probably all are, it can show up as wanting to be seen as kind and self-aware, right? So what if someone thinks that you are stupid and mean and inconsiderate? Immediately you have a, I'm not like that. And you don't turn towards them and ask, why would you think that? Like, have I harmed you? Has there been something I've said and done that actually had a negative effect? Self-cherishing is what makes us defensive. It makes us defensive and fragile and just overly concerned with how people view us. And because of that, we get a type of anxiety or paralysis or, just kind of a need to kind of show off. Yeah. So whatever your personal kind of tendencies are, you might go too big or too small. Yeah. If you enter a group of people, yeah, you come in big. Yeah. With the big, here is who I am. See me as I want to be seen. Or I don't want to be any trouble. Please don't see me at all. And we back and hide in a corner energetically, right? And both of those are problematic because you've put yourself at the center of the universe. Even if it's an uncomfortable, embarrassing center, you're still making yourself the main character. So self-cherishing is what does that, and it is operating all the time. So if we can figure out what it looks like for us, we can really manage it and be a lot easier to live with, work with, be with, but also a lot more relaxed. It immediately makes you so much more relaxed when your self-cherishing is under control. So you just kind of name it and let it be with some humor. And know that the reason we have it in the first place is because of self-grasping, right? So this is that grasps at appearances, false appearances we have due to ignorance. Everything, including ourselves, seems or appears to exist inherently, as it seems, in and of itself, all by itself, independent. And the reality is that everything is actually dependently arisen. So these two thoughts, self-cherishing and self-grasping, they have antidotes. That's the whole point of practice. They can be and will be overcome, thank goodness. But we have to really be honest with what the issue is. The issue is these two, and then everything else arises because of them. Because of self-cherishing and self-grasping, we get angry, we get jealous, we have pride, we have attachment, all the other messes. All the 84,000 different delusions. So self-grasping creates that appearance, not in the sense of sight, but in the sense of like seeming. It creates that feeling of dualism that we all have, of like a fundamental separation between self and others, which is not to say we're all one in a kind of hippie way, but that we're interconnected fundamentally. Yeah, and I love hippies, just so you know. But that it's not like we're just kind of a big glunk mush mind that is not knowing that we're that. It's not that simplistic, right? We all have our individual mind streams, but those individual mind streams are of a very similar type. They have clarity and awareness. They have Buddha nature. They all have innate ignorance, and this, they've removed it. And countless things have happened over the course of time. So if it's easier, you can think of minds like drops of water. And imagine the drops of water in the sea. Each one of them is the same kind of molecules, but they all had their different journey to the sea. right? They all had a different pathway to the ocean, different experiences before they got there. Some were in rivers and some were in lakes and some were, drunk by people and some were drunk by animals and some evaporated and came, they all have their different story, but they're all little water molecules. And when they're in the sea, you can't really tell them apart, but they do each have a different history. So imagine that all of our mind streams are like these drops of water that have their different history, and that when we remove self-grasping and remove self-cherishing and all of the eons of negative karma that we've created as a result of those, and then we develop this mind to its utmost extent, it's like all of those drops of water going to the sea. That's like the Dharmakaya minds of all the Buddhas, right? And then the Buddhas, like the sea, there's like waves, they have shape. Some of them are big and scary, some of them are sweet and light, just like the Buddhas take a wrathful form or a peaceful form, but it's all Dharmakaya mind manifesting as in order to benefit us, right? So if we're thinking about the issue, we have to remember that the only point of talking about it really is that it's removable and manageable, thank goodness, and that's why we practice bodhicitta. But do you feel clear about these two? Do you have questions arising so far about self-cherishing, self-grasping, anything to clarify? Self-grasping is subtler, but do you feel like self-cherishing, you know yourself when it's particularly up? Even if it hasn't kind of turned into an obvious anger or attachment, you kind of know that feeling of self-cherishing really up and driving? Is there a change you can think of that happens to you even physically? Like maybe you get more tight and tense, or maybe you get kind of more floppy and like couch potato. Yeah. Either way, it can
Huh.
happen. Yeah.
Maybe
What happened?
a question to that.
Sure.
I mean that also always comes late. So you realize that like in 1 hour or maybe next day. I think that's really the problem. So you can't really react, at least I can't, right, to that
Yeah.
when you need it actually.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
it's
point,
true.
right?
Yeah, you can think, oh, last week I was full of self-cherishing. It's nice I'm a little better now. But actually being able to recognize that yesterday or last night that you had it really up, this means that you have enough self-awareness to at least notice it, right? Which is the main thing. Without self-awareness, there's nothing you can do really. So you have enough self-awareness to know then in that chapter, that was really problematic. And so if you get more used to checking in with it, it gets closer and closer to being able to catch it in real time. So it's just a skill that you develop. It's not like you magically are good at it. You really do have to do this looking back through your memories, thinking in different circumstances. When was it obviously problematic? What was my body like? What was my speech like? Did it get faster or slower? Did I start to exaggerate more? Or did I start to get more critical? Are there things that I can notice about my voice? Does it go higher? Sometimes it goes higher, sometimes it goes lower, but like you know yourself, right? What are the characteristics? And then you can get more subtle into what is my mind doing? Do my thoughts start racing? Or do they start kind of freezing? What happens to me when it's a little bit unsettled in there? And so when you think about your memories, it's not as sort of confronting because it's already happened. But you can really use it as kind of a scientific experiment and really kind of like make those notes of what are the classic characteristics of me in this place. Because the more subtle you can go, the better. Usually we're just like, well, I know what I'm like when I'm angry, but that's like so many moments after just kind of self-cherishing being up. If you can catch it when you're just like a little unsettled, then even just noticing it dissolves it. Once you're fully angry, oh, that's so much harder to overcome in the moment. So just kind of make that a practice of at the end of each day, checking in with yourself, like when was it up? When was it less? What can I point to that triggered it? How can I manage it very gently in tiny ways going forward? And you will find your self-awareness increases and you're able to catch it more and more often in real time, or at least let it live a shorter duration before you catch it. So it's just a skill. Yeah. Yeah, there was something in the chat. Yes, we notice after we make the mistake, yes. And yeah, John's saying the heart rate goes up and the field of vision narrows. Yeah, you get sort of very self-aware, but like in a self-conscious way. Yeah. Yeah, classics. Yeah, was there another question? I thought maybe Vivian, did you?
Vivian? Yeah, Vivian.
Sorry, yeah, I was actually going to say something which was then pretty much answered. I just find that it's a pattern that we've lived with all our lives. I mean, especially I'm a bit older, and understanding it is one thing, but bringing it into your everyday, changing completely how you react every day. It's yeah, you really have to practice it.
You do, and it is true that as you get older, it's harder to change certain patterns. That's certainly true, although we have so many patterns from beginningless lives until now. And then in this life, in this body, certain ones got reinforced. I think the first step is even just to know yourself well enough and to forgive it. Because if you over-identify with the symptoms of your self-cherishing, it is so easy to go into shame. Shame and regret and guilt and just feeling like, oh, I'm never going to get any better. Oh, and so you either get this sort of shame, sadness, grief about time lost to these delusions, or you get defensive and excuse it and make a whole story about it. And of course I'm like this because you should have known my mother and father, and you should have known how I grew up, and you should have known the circumstances of my marriage. And if you knew, you would understand how I got this way. And we get kind of like defensive about it. And both of those are symptoms of over-identification. So it's identify, don't identify with. Identify, don't identify with. So even if you can't change it right away, being able to get that space that knows, here are the problematic patterns of this particular mind stream. All of them are removable. None of them are me, but they're my responsibility because they're here. Then if someone says to you, oh, you're really critical. Why are you so critical? Say that's one of your things. Then you can just say, yeah, I do have a habit of criticism. I'm working on it. I apologize for hurting you. I am working on it. And you don't have that like tension, that fragility of trying to justify. You can just own it, right? Because you're not feeling it's you. So you don't have to change right away for things to change around it. So expecting, radical things to change in very hard-grained habits, that's too harsh on yourself, right? But to be able to know them with enough spaciousness, that makes you a lot more flexible when they come into the lives of others and others are saying it's problematic when you do this. I mean, how hard is it to confront someone who is defensive? It's like you don't even want to try. You're just like, I can't talk to them about that. It'll just be a fight. You know. But, like for example, I talk too fast and have too many words. This is a problem. I'm working on it, but I'm really not that much better at it than I was 10 years ago. I'm really not. But I do know. So if someone says to me, "Oh, Yönten, you're talking too fast," I don't say, "Oh, well, I have a lot to say." I just go, "Oh, yeah, I probably am. My bad. Slowing down." Like it's funny, it's embarrassing that it's still an issue, and that embarrassment is a sign that I'm still a little identified with it. But I know myself, so if I'm called on it in that way, I can just do my best to readjust and do what people need. but I don't have that same feeling of needing to prove or needing to justify, because the space creates humor. The over-identification creates, like, humiliated feelings, shameful feelings. When there's space, you also feel like you're connected to the human condition, and you see that you're not the only one. And so when you're laughing at yourself, you're, like, laughing at the absurdity of all humanity, and you actually feel more connected to people instead of less. So self-grasping creates this illusion of duality and this feeling of separateness. And then because of that, we're trying to, like, build a wall or build a moat around the self to protect it, and, like, gather all the supplies and people we like to come into our little castle of self, you know? And then we feel sort of paranoid and suspicious and nervous about anyone getting close to our doors, you know? And if we can just kind of be like, "Oh, I built that moat. I created that wall. There was no problem." There was no actual problem. Sometimes you don't even need to change that much. You just have the awareness that can be flexible and recalibrate when you catch yourself. So, change takes a long time, but self-awareness going up and up and up, that actually can happen fairly quickly. And that really will save the day, your self-awareness. So even if those habits don't change right away, your awareness around them makes them so much more manageable. Yeah. I don't know, do you guys resonate with that, or what are your feelings? I know habits, man, habits are hard. Yeah. We we feel embarrassed, we justify, we avoid talking about, or we over talk about, you know?
I got lots of negative self-talk recently, and so I'm trying to remember that, yeah, I'm not the only one, but you really feel like you are the only one with this problem in the whole universe in this case.
Yep.
And it's very, very difficult sometimes to get space for that.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. And if you can sort of think the community of fellow sufferers, right? Like, so whatever your issue is, instead of thinking I'm the only one like this, think, what is my community of fellow sufferers who probably have this problem right now in this moment? And, you know, it's like we have a tribe of people with the same problem. It's a funny psychology, but we all know that it works. Why do support groups work? You know, a grief support group with everyone who's lost a loved one should be a horrible experience because everyone is sad. But you're all together with your sadness, you feel better being all together than you did all by yourself in your house. It's the same with afflictions. It's the same with negative habits, that as soon as you recognize there are millions, maybe billions of people with your same exact habits, you're all in it together, just muddling through. And all of your bad habits made sense at the time of their creation. They were a survival tool, or they were a tool for relief. They were something that made sense at the time, and then they got repeated and they just became a habit now that they're outdated. You know, it's embarrassing, but before they were outdated, they made perfect sense. You know, so it's somehow just like, be sweet to yourself. Yeah, be a little
Yeah,
bit.
and especially when you are taught that you should be the brave girl that
Yeah,
manages everything, it's very toxic sometimes, and it
yeah,
works the opposite way because you are feeling weak at some point. If,
yep,
when you try to be very strong and very self-sufficient and everything like that.
exactly. And however we see ourselves and however other people seem to see us, there's something very deep that feels like this is how I get love. And that if I'm not that, I will not have love. If I'm not that, I will not be cared for or respected or seen. So, what if I'm not what everyone thinks I am and needs me to be? What if I'm not the smart girl or the competent one or the one that saves the day? Who am I if I'm not those things? I have to be those things or I won't be loved. And, you know, and that's the trap that we fall into. And we have to remember that even dung beetles have Buddha nature. You could get much worse and still be worthy of love. You don't have to get any better. You don't have to prove anything, right? But it is interesting how self-cherishing helps build this whole identity. And we even know the whole identity isn't true all the time in all contexts, but we built it. And so now we have to like take care of it because this is our strategy for getting affection, you know? And that needs to be deconstructed a little bit. And of course, some people will be mad at you for not living up to the story you told them of yourself, right? But that is their problem. Yeah. It's easier said than done, but sometimes we think we need specific people to make us happy, when in fact we just need connection, and any old people will do. We make it a little too special sometimes. And of course, long-term relationships and long-term friendships are very important, and you put a lot of time and effort into building communication, and that is very valuable and precious. And also, if you've done it once, you could do it again. You know, so we have to kind of make ourselves less desperate for our needs to connect to certain people, because that creates its own issues, doesn't it? So if they don't like you for not being what they need you to be, that's their own journey. Yeah. Yeah, Brenda, please. Nice to see you.
Hello, Venerable. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, the last few things you've said really connected to what I have put my hand up to say, this need to be seen and need for specific people. I recently had an experience with a small Dharma group that I meet with online regularly. And I spoke about something that had happened to me that I was a bit extremely embarrassed about. A very self-cherishing attitude that had come up, and I explained it and said, you know, this is not how I want to be. And I really wanted somebody to give me some sort of positive feedback, and I got nothing. Nobody said anything. They moved on. And I thought, oh, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to be acknowledging me. You're supposed to be helping me. And really, what you just said, that be less desperate to connect. Gosh, yes, that really, really made sense to me, because, yeah, I was looking, I suppose it was a self-cherishing attitude, wanting acknowledgement for my self-cherishing attitude that I was exposing and being, as I thought, terribly brave. And oh, look, I'm making myself vulnerable. Look how clever I am. so yeah, just the last comments you made, the need to be seen, need for specific people, need to be less desperate to connect. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, relatable, very relatable. It's this delicate dance, because our wisdom knows, our deep, deep wisdom, our inner guru knows we do need connection. We do need love. We need those things, and those are fair needs. But then our self-cherishing and self-grasping tell us a whole story of how to get that is a lie. So it sometimes feels like we have to get rid of the whole thing. We have to get rid of needing connection. We have to get rid of needing love, because we know that self-cherishing and self-grasping are lying to us. But that's not what's being asked of us. Self-cherishing and self-grasping are why we don't feel the connection that is already there. There is infinite connection. We just need to reveal it and expose it and feel it and reach back to it. Self-cherishing and self-grasping says, no, 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 you must build the wall, the fortress, to protect you from the bad, and you must hoard all of the good, when nothing really belonged to anybody, right? Not even really your own heir, you know? So that's the delicate dance, is that sometimes we can't let go of habits or let go of certain ways of thinking, because there's a grain of wisdom there that we know we shouldn't let go of. You know, and the grain of wisdom is you deserve and need love and connection. But the strategies to get it are strategies from self-cherishing and self-grasping, and they are doomed to fail. Yeah. So it's kind of just acknowledging there is nothing wrong with the want or the urge. It's just the strategies that are problematic and the worldview that thinks certain ways about them that are problematic. And so when we're working to develop bodhicitta, when we want this mind of enlightenment that seeks Buddhahood, that seeks enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, what we're really saying is, may the mess of my mind be purified, may the strength of my mind be developed, and now, from a position of strength, may I be the best condition for others that I can be, to bring out the best in them. So I'm not the savior of mankind. I'm not swooping in with a cape and saying, I'll save you. You're just from a position of having healed yourself, offering medicine that they can take or leave. And so it's not like we need to wait to be Buddhas to be beneficial. It's just that right now, the way in which we're beneficial is limited by our grasping at inherent existence. Yeah, and our self-centered attitudes and our need for applause. We do a good thing and then we want everyone to celebrate, throw us a parade because we brought a casserole to the sad person down the road, like somehow doing things while being your own witness starts to cut the need for validation, starts to interrupt that whole issue around reputation. If you can be a witness to yourself without it being self-consciousness. Yeah, it's almost like you're observing your own life. Yeah, not with like a whole dissociated, way far away, weird feeling, but just objectivity of it was good that you did that, and also you did nothing alone. Whatever the did that you did. You're recognizing that you are never the main character of the story. No one is the main character of the story. What happened was this set of circumstances came together and you were one piece, and you can be happy about having been one piece in the benefit of others. How wonderful it is to get to be a piece of something beneficial. And also, we don't really know what is beneficial in the long term. So we don't want to get too attached to outcomes. We don't want to be too attached to our role in it. So having that like happy, but not grasping, acknowledging without identifying. It's a bit of a dance. Yeah, a bit of a dance. So when we look at these vows then, let's see, we just need to make sure we know what we're talking about with bodhicitta, right? So there's it's sometimes called the awakening mind, relative bodhicitta. The awakening mind is this altruistic intention to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So the awakening mind, or bodhicitta, is characterized by an objective, the full awakening of Buddhahood, and a purpose, the fulfillment of others' welfare. And so then we have ultimate bodhicitta, which is the same Mahayana motivation to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but it's in the mind of someone who has realized emptiness directly or perceptually, what's known as an Arya. So when we are developing these, we need to remember that when we talk about emptiness, we're referring to the absence of inherent existence, a characteristic that all phenomena have, and that this philosophical view sounds like nihilism. It does sound like that, and that is not what is being spoken about. So I think you guys know this, but just to kind of flag it, whenever we're talking about emptiness, we're talking about an absence of inherence. And if inherent or intrinsic aren't words that really work for you, start with the word independent. Nothing is independent because everything is dependent. That can help. Yeah. Okay. So relative bodhicitta is what we're mainly working on when we're taking the Bodhisattva vows, but of course it creates the merit to go on and realize ultimate bodhicitta. So vows and samayas are words that you hear in Buddhism. Vow can be equated to precept, generally speaking, and it means to restrain from certain actions, either a naturally destructive action or something which is prescribed for certain purposes. Then a samaya or a dampsik is a close bond, something that you do rather than something that you refrain from. And there are close bonding or samaya practices related to tantra, and that's not what we're talking about. We're mainly talking about restraint here with the Bodhisattva vows. So there's wishing bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. Wishing bodhicitta, you need to abandon the 4 black negative dharmas and adopt the 4 white positive dharmas. And I think we should have just a little break before we go into those in detail. So let's just have a 5-minute stretch just to keep ourselves fresh, and then we'll get into the details of it. Okay. Okay. So let's get into it with the Bodhisattva vows. The Bodhisattva vows, I guess we should know there are a few different ways of approaching them based on different sutras from the Buddha. So the Buddha taught the Bodhisattva vows in a lot of different contexts. And so we might get to that in the course of these sessions, some of the different approaches that they have. But we'll be looking at from the Sanskrit tradition. And in that case, we have 18 root vows, we have 46 secondary offenses. And before we even get to that, we have a discussion on wishing bodhicitta. So wishing bodhicitta is what it sounds like. Yeah, it's wanting to have bodhicitta. Engaging bodhicitta is really going for it. So it doesn't mean you necessarily have a realization of bodhicitta, but it means that you are fully invested. So wishing bodhicitta is something that even if you don't have these vows, you can start to think about really wanting to have the aspiration for enlightenment, really wanting to take your mind more under control, to take the reins of your own mind, and to really consciously have a self-directed evolution, not to kind of let life teach you what it's going to teach you in kind of a passive way where you learn the same lesson 20 times, but it never sinks in, and you have the same argument and the same angst and the same sadness for decades at a time. What you want to do when you're thinking about bodhicitta is to decide to be more proactive with what you say to yourself, and then how you respond to what you say to yourself, and what you choose to believe and don't believe of what comes up in your own mind, and to really start getting structured and organized in the way you conceptualize life and people and relationships. And at the same time, thinking in terms of less kind of intellectually and more, how do I create warmth? How do I open the heart? So on one sense, you're kind of organizing your actual thoughts, your internal narrative, the words in your head, the ways you frame things, your impressions, trying to get those in alignment with what is healthy. But it's a simultaneous practice where you're very much trying to think of how to keep that heart center, like the heart chakra or just the general sort of torso area, just this whole area, a feeling of it being soft and a feeling of it being open and receptive. And not necessarily like a sponge that just takes on everybody's stuff, but that has this warmth that sends out goodwill as its kind of default setting. Our computers and our phones, they have their default setting. What if our heart's default setting was just kind of this outward radiating warmth of just goodwill, kindness? So far in our life, that has happened maybe spontaneously without a lot of our own control. Maybe it was some dinner party with some good friends where everyone was talking fluidly and no one was competing. There was no rivalries. No one was trying to show off. You were all just playing with ideas and bouncing off each other. And it was one of those magical moments where you all felt really good connection and depth. And together with that intellectual stimulation was just this deep, warm feeling in your heart. Yeah, I think of some moment like that in your life. Hopefully there's been many moments like that, but some moment like that, Or it could be something as simple as when you like pick up your little dog and give it a cuddle and you just feel, ah, right? It doesn't have to be something like totally human based. It could also be moments in nature where, you had a big hike, you got to the top of a mountain, you sat down, you drank your water, and you looked at the view and just felt some kind of peace. That, right? We've had these moments in our life where our afflictions volume turned down and our feeling of separation, the volume turned down. And there was kind of a spacious, warm openness. And that's kind of a visceral, experiential, somatic kind of experience that's sort of the body, sort of the mind. And we could talk about mind and body stuff some other time. But if you can think, my Dharma practice needs to have the characteristic of warmth, together with all of these thoughts I'm saying to myself. It's a really important piece to all this, because otherwise we get too stuck in our head trying to force an emotion or trying to force a worldview that we already want and believe in, but it's not coming naturally. Sometimes what we need to do is come back to the heart center and just remember those moments of connection, and the memory itself can start to wake that up again. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So with wishing bodhicitta, you're kind of like warming up your heart. You're warming it up and you're getting it ready to radiate out. You're getting it ready to connect to others. And you do this through what are very kind of religious sounding thoughts, but they have a deep kind of experiential aspect. So to abandon the 4 negative dharmas, it can sound very sort of preachy, teachy, but there's some depth there that's really important. So the first one is you want to abandon or stop or prevent knowingly confusing one's abbot, guru, or other holy beings with lies, such as changing the subject when your guru asks you to do something, or not telling your guru of your negative actions because you're afraid of their scolding you. So when does this even come up, right? When does this even happen that you would have to think about it, right? This first one, first of all, you need a spiritual teacher for this to even apply, don't you? Really, it's about your relationship to the divine, whether you have a person that is the gateway to that for you or not. It is really interesting how much we, I guess, try to deceive or lie to our own self and to whatever we think is listening and observing us. Whether it's the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, whether it's just the essence of love, whether it's creation or God, whatever we think is the divine and is aware of us and watching us, there is some strange part of us that is also deceiving and trying to like not let them see the whole thing. Yeah. Which is so funny because whatever it is, I think we all agree it is loving. It is loving and compassionate. And it also probably already knows you're not going to get away with hiding anything, right? But there's some sort of like, yeah, there's some sort of like hiding under the covers, please don't see me fully, I'm ashamed sort of thing, which goes together with not wanting to see that in yourself. And so if when you're trying to develop bodhicitta, if one of your first steps is just kind of an openness to knowing yourself and revealing that to the compassion mind of all the Buddhas. They know anyway. They love you anyway, but you having that openness of heart and that transparency and that self-awareness is going to be one of the biggest keys to practice. So of course, literally, don't lie to your spiritual teachers. Sure. But there's something deeper than that that's kind of inviting us to look into of what is our relationship to those we see as mentors, whether in a physical body or something more abstract. Can we be deeply honest, rigorously honest with ourselves while they bear witness? It will really help. So, being honest with your teachers also is like being honest with the doctor. They can't really help you unless you tell them what's wrong. right? So you go to the doctor and you've got, gangrene, and you say, I have a paper cut. Well, they're not going to give you the correct diagnosis. Yeah. So same with the Buddhas, same with teachers, same with people that are helping you on the spiritual path. They can't really help you unless you tell them what is wrong. Yeah. Even if they know more of the story exists, you're saying, this is what I'm willing to work with. And so that's all, right? That's all that's there for them to work with, even if they know there's more. You know this probably if you're a parent, right? Or if you're a teacher in a secular context, right? You know what it is when it's like, all right, they're telling me they're having a problem with a friend at school. I know it's a deeper issue of how they connect to this whole group of friends, or how they connect in sports, or whatever it is, whatever it is. But they're just saying it's about this one person today. That's all you can really work with until they acknowledge there's more to the story. Right? So if you can kind of imagine the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in a somewhat parental way, but not like in a paternalistic, patriarchal, authoritarian, yucky way, but kind of like they want us to grow up. Yeah. So if we keep telling them fibs, what can they do? What can they do? Right. So this first one is interesting. The second one is to abandon discouraging others from practicing virtuous actions or causing them to regret virtue that they've created, such as saying, it is good, but it would be difficult for you to maintain that practice when someone is practicing renunciation, the determination to be free from samsara. You cause them to doubt their virtuous practice. So even if they don't regret their virtue, your encouragement to do so is a negative dharma. So this one is sometimes related to jealousy, sometimes related to pride, where someone is doing something good and we don't really think they're up to it. We think we're a little better than them. Sure, we can do it, but they can't really do it. Right? And we think, oh, that's a bit much for you. You're a beginner. Right? Like, who do we know? Like, we don't know. Beginner, right? We don't know. So it could be out of pride that you stop someone doing a big virtue. Or it could be out of jealousy and competitiveness where you like don't want them to do the cool thing you want to do. And so you kind of like minimize it, or you kind of ruin their momentum in some way. So this one might not come up a lot, but especially if you live at a Dharma center, this can come up where you want to help, but you're wanting to help like a new person has a little bit of taint of some pride or jealousy. So of course, if you see a new student and they are brand new to the Dharma and they say, I want to do a 3-year retreat, you might say to them from a place of wisdom and compassion, maybe just learn how to sit for a couple minutes first before the 3 years. Maybe just gradually work up to it. Maybe get some more teachings first. Saying something like that, of course, is coming from wisdom and compassion. But if someone at your same level says, I just got a benefactor who is going to offer me support for a 3-year retreat, and you go, oh, that's going to be really hard though. I don't know. Like, would it kind of be jealousy, actually? You saying that? Jealousy. Or pride that thinks you're better than them and you wouldn't do it. So how possibly could they do it? Whatever. Like this. So it's something about the way you communicate to other people when they're doing a good thing needs to be looked at. Yeah. What do you guys take from that particular one? It's an interesting one, and how it relates to developing bodhicitta is interesting as well. We don't want to discourage others from practicing virtue. We don't want them to regret virtue that they've created. That does seem important, but can you really feel kind of intuitively why? Intuitively why?
I think there may be some fear here that the pupil, the student, will be better than the master, and it's
Yeah.
quite deep, and you cannot say it loud sometimes, but
Yep. Yep. I had a really good boss once who was training students together with me, and he would always say, "I hope they stand on our shoulders. I hope they stand on our shoulders, that all of the things that we have learned, that they learn and then surpass us. May they stand on our shoulders." And I love that imagery, and I love that way of thinking that, it's not a race who gets to Buddhahood first. And if the people that you're supporting and teaching get there before you, wonderful, they can help you get there. Great. Thank goodness. However, we need to all get there, it's not a race. So, having that feeling of, oh, thank goodness someone has the conditions to do good. What can I do to support you? It really helps diffuse your own jealousy. It helps diffuse your own pride stuff. And, to really practice rejoicing in Buddhism is a huge practice. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to talk about it for hours and hours in sessions about how important rejoicing was. And, as someone was an expat, who had left America and lived overseas for many years, whenever he would say, practice rejoicing, it felt like some very cheesy plastic Hallmark card, like gratitude practice that was sort of superficial and yucky and American. That's how it sounded to me. That's just transparency on my part. Practice rejoicing. It sounded like a superficial gratitude practice, not a deep gratitude practice, which is lovely, but that kind of like cheesy, like be grateful to everyone, like in a kind of yucky, it's all good, like surfer philosophy kind of way. And, there are profound surfers out there, no doubt, but there was something about it that, I don't know, I had resistance to. And then he was explaining about how much it's the antidote to jealousy and also is a way to build more merit yourself. Whenever you're thinking and identifying someone doing good and saying, yes, more of that, how wonderful it is that that's happening, it actually gives you some momentum. Yeah, it gives you some encouragement to do more positivity. So the side effect of rejoicing is that it's an antidote to jealousy, and it also helps develop merit. But the immediate thing that happens is sometimes you get energized. Sometimes you get inspired when other people are doing good. So whether it's a, worldly charitable action or it's something specific to Dharma, sort of consciously noticing when people are doing good and being happy about that and naming it to yourself. Like those simple things, like if you're stressed and you're going to the supermarket and someone lets you go in front of them and get the good parking space, like you really some days need that good parking space, right? And you're like, thank you, stranger. Thank you. Like it really touches you, but like let it touch you. Those tiny little moments of kindness where people get over themselves and think of others, it's like heroic. So this rejoicing practice is really important. But the other piece of this black dharma to avoid is to please not make people regret when they do a good thing. Don't make them regret a good thing because it kills their momentum. Yeah. So, this is a tricky one, but sometimes, again, our pride and our jealousy will do this. Maybe someone made a big donation to some charity, and it was a little bit more than their budget could handle, and it was a little bit foolish of them, and they should have offered a little less, but it's done now, right? Like, it's too late now. Don't make them regret it. Think, oh, wow, that was really a pinch. That was really, oh, wow, that's a lot. Okay, what can I do to help you get through the rest of the month and make sure you have, bread? Or whatever, like support the fact that it's too late now. They've done it. Don't make them regret it. But then, the next time they want to make a giant offering, say, oh, that was so wonderful. But remember last time it was like a little much. So maybe do 50 instead of 100. And then you can keep doing it really happily and it won't, drain the bank, stuff like that. Right. So it could also be that it's something that you don't necessarily call virtue, but is important to them. Think of it a little bit like if a little kid draws you a picture and it's terrible artistically, right? They have no color balance. They don't understand color theory. They're 4 years old. right? You're not going to critique their art and say, I don't really want this. This is not perfect art. You would just be happy, wouldn't you? You'd be like, oh, a little kid drew me a picture. This is fantastic. I'm framing it immediately, right? This is kind of like the delight that we want to have when people do a good thing, even if it's the sort of thing that is not really like what we care about, right? Like you didn't need the crayon drawing of the forest, you know, and like scary monkeys in it or whatever the kid drew for you, right? But you're just delighted that they did it. So somehow that attitude, not in a patronizing way, not in a condescending way, but like just really happy when people care about things. There's a type of cynicism and kind of jadedness in society when people get excited about stuff and then we all kind of go, oh yeah, yeah, that's great. And it doesn't really help the cause. So whatever we can do to not have a cynical attitude or a jaded attitude towards people when they're excited about something good, this helps the work for enlightenment. Do you have thoughts about this one or questions about this one? Yeah, Eleanor, please. Yeah, nice to see you.
To forget to unmute. I was just thinking about a group that I go to once a week. I can't do much, but I go to the group, and it's called Creative Hands. And the group makes lots of things for different people who have no money, you know, like for children, for adults. And we have quite a lot of New Zealanders from Colombia, you know, and they feel the cold terribly, you know, from where they are to New Zealand. It's a very different climate. And I can't do much, but you know, in that group, there's a beautiful, beautiful feeling within the group. You know, they do, and it's like you could call it a therapy group if you wanted to, but it's like you go there and you feel so much better when you come home. I sit there and do not much except talk to people, and you know, and it's really lovely. And I was just thinking as you were talking, that's what goes on in our group. There's no gossip, you know, there's no politics, there's no religion, there's no you know, talking about other people behind your back. It's just a lovely group of women that are doing good. You're doing lovely stuff for people out in the community, you know, and I just think they're all bodhisattvas, really. You know, I think they're just amazing, incredible. Yeah, so that was what I was thinking when you were talking about. Just
Yeah.
rejoicing in it, coming from deep, deep, deep within, you know, deep within the heart. You go there and you feel a bit jaded maybe, but you come home and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm glad I went. I'm so glad I went. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it would be so easy for someone from the outside to be like, that's no big deal, and it would kind of kill your joy a little bit. But you know,
Mm.
there is something profound in those activities and
Yeah.
how important it is to really treasure them and value them and rejoice in them.
Mm.
And, you know, all of that without over-identification, without being too like proud of yourself, you know, but you know, it's like cheer people on, you know, cheer
Yeah.
people on. So I think that some of these for the wishing bodhicitta, you know, they don't get as much conversation as the root vows, but there's some real profundity there in what creates community, what creates momentum, what keeps you feeling inspired, what actually facilitates the path. You know, so it's worth just kind of sitting with these in between class and just kind of like read them and think over them together with the commentary that I'm giving and just kind of think about how they relate to your life and how you might practice them more deeply because intellectually not so hard, but in terms of practice, there's actually a great deal of depth there. Um, you know, the some of them are not immediately relevant, like abusing a bodhisattva out of anger. How do you know if someone is a bodhisattva? If a bodhisattva is at fault, if your abusive words are heard by others, you create this negative karma. So in the commentary, it's kind of like assume everyone is a bodhisattva, right? Assume everyone is a bodhisattva, then you will never transgress this. But the important thing for us is to understand the difference between abuse and, I guess, skillful critique, and, and what is being assertive and what is being aggressive, and to get very clear in our mind about those things. Because if someone's doing the wrong thing, the invitation is not to be passive, actually, at all. It's to be proactive and protect others from harm in a skillful way based on your own skills and your own life experience. But abuse is words that intend to wound. You want to wound with your words. It's totally different than saying, this that you did is problematic and we need to talk about why or how, and maybe stop you doing it, and here's the consequence if you don't stop doing it. That might have an impact on the person that makes them feel a little sad, but your intention was not to wound them. Your intention was to help elevate them to their good heart out of their afflicted responses, right? So if we're just really clear about what is the difference between abuse and constructive criticism, what is the difference between aggression and assertiveness, then we won't need to worry about if we're transgressing this vow or not. We can just not be abusive whether someone's a bodhisattva or not, right? Some of this ties into also if you're really, really critical of people doing good and you're doing it in a community setting, that can kind of ruin it for them a little bit, right? Maybe you've had this happen at Dharma centers where there's like a teacher visiting that not lots of people know, but some people know them and they're talking about how great they are and here's their history and here's their credentials. And then there's one kind of like grumpy person who's like, well, they're not that great. Actually, and they go into kind of a critical thing, and it can ruin the momentum of people being happy that the person is coming. Now, that's a totally different thing than saying, actually, guys, I heard this really problematic thing that they did, and we should probably know that they did this, like, I don't know, they embezzled money or something, something really problematic that makes them not a suitable teacher. Say that. Protect people. Let them know. But just kind of like being snarky, this word snarky, just kind of being like, just for the sake of it. Even if you're not excited about a teacher, if they're a valid teacher with the right characteristics of ethics and so forth, let people have their fun. Right? There's often teachers that come to our Dharma centers that, it's just like not exactly the style that I resonate with. It's not exactly the sort of teachings I want to go to. And I just keep my mouth shut because there's people that really benefit from them. And we all have different karmic connections. So, so unless there's something problematic, just zip it. Yeah, Lars, please.
Yes, then there's this vow about us. Sometimes it can be beneficial to sort of assume a wrathful attitude towards somebody because it's needed for them, not abuse. But people, what if they heard me thinking, oh, Lars is really abusive right now, but for that person in the subject, it's my intention to benefit, but people would suspect me to be not nice, be negative. Well, how do we navigate in that one?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's very hard for us to know other people's intention. And so wrath, sort of an appearance of kind of a little bit of aggression, but fueled by compassion, is something that really we should try not to use until we're very, very stable and are very, very sure of our own motivations. And it's sort of like you can trust yourself to be wrathful with maybe a child or an animal because you really know that you have their best interest at heart. You can be quite certain that you always want to protect a child and you always want to protect a vulnerable animal. So saying, don't run into traffic very strongly because you don't want them to run into traffic and hurt themselves, you can be sure that that's compassion and love. But if you use that same tone with an adult, with someone who is your peer, it is a little harder to know if you're coming from wrath or if you're coming from wanting to be domineering. and dominant and oppressive and make them submit to you because of your pride. It's much harder for us to distinguish when it's wrath and when it's actually aggression, when it's with our peers. So if you feel very certain and you know that this situation warrants it, you do it. And if it doesn't work because they misunderstand you, you just hold your own witness and you know that your heart was in the right place and that that wasn't necessarily the way to get through to them. You'll try another technique, but you don't need to feel guilty about it. But you know, there are some people who are very good at wrath and it works quite universally, but most of us, it's not the method for us. Most of us. Yeah. There's a few teachers, I'm sure you can think of them if you've been around FPMT, that their default setting is wrath. But those ones, it's like you can just feel the warmth underneath the directness. You know, you can feel this deep care and this deep warmth, and they can shout at you and you like laugh and you're like, you're right, I am silly. You know, like the effect is positive. So, yeah, it's really context specific, but it's best not to practice wrath until you're very, very self-aware and stable when it's with peers. Yeah, and then when you do it, to just trust yourself. Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. One way to know is if you feel very clear and you feel very grounded when you are speaking strongly. If you're feeling a little shaky, if you're feeling a little hot in the cheeks or a little like pit in the stomach, if your mind is a little something, then it's probably an affliction there, and don't speak with that tone. But if you feel deeply, deeply calm and clear and you think they need a strong aspect, it probably is more likely to be wrath and not actual anger. So that's one criteria to ask yourself is, am I shaky or not? Yeah, if I'm shaky, I probably shouldn't speak from this place. It's one of the defining characteristics of an affliction is when the mind is unpeaceful. So like that. All right, so we'll do the last one here of the refrainings. Putting on an air of having selfless thought, but having ulterior motives other than the pure wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, such as pretending to be a scholar or concealing your shortcomings. So this is just classic, being pretentious, yeah, having a pretense, and it's very normal, and we should stop it. Yeah. It's very normal, and we should stop it. It helps to remember when you were a new Dharma student and you were open because you didn't expect yourself to be an expert. In situations where you don't expect yourself to know anything, it's so much more relaxing. You listen so much more deeply. And the way you are with people is a lot more humble, but it's not like low self-esteem. It's that you just know you haven't learned that yet. So you're just curious and open and enjoying learning. And that's the atmosphere we want to bring, whether we're a new Dharma student or an old Dharma student. It's just once we're an old Dharma student, it's harder to not feel like we should be the expert, you know, and it's harder for us to ask simple questions because we feel like we should know. And then if we're around other Dharma students, we kind of feel like the need to perform a Dharma person rather than just be a Dharma person. You know, I will perform a Dharma person by using my mala loudly as I walk around. You know, oh, money, pay me, oh, money, pay me, oh, money, pay me, you know, something like that, right? Or just, you know what it is. Yeah, that kind of pretense or that affect that's like cringy. Yeah. So just be normal. Don't be weird. Yeah. Okay. All right. So just have a look at these vows. Lars will send them to you and see if any of them jump out at you. But we'll just kind of keep working through and looking at different aspects of bodhicitta and how to practice it. And we'll do some meditation next time. Is there anything that you really want to focus in on in this course that's coming up right away that I can build into next week? Is there anything that you've been really wondering about? Yeah, please, Kristen.
Yeah,
Yeah, hi. Is there anything you'd like us to like a section you want us to read or focus on for next time?
Definitely look at these wishing bodhicitta. So on yeah, how to guard the vows from degenerating in this life and how to maintain and enhance your practice in future lives. So in the PDF, particularly look at abandoning the 4 negative dharmas and adopting the 4 positive dharmas. So we went over the negative ones. Look at the positive ones and just kind of see what comes up for you. They're pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Is that
And
pages 6 and 7?
it is, yes, exactly.
Fabulous,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
And
yes,
and
please go ahead.
also, yeah, and also how to be upholding the vows correctly, yet being understand me correctly, a normal person at work and family, so you don't stick out being the weird, grumpy guy in the corner. People thinking, oh, Buddhists, they are so, weird. I mean, how can you balance well, still being in the vows, yet being also quite normal? That's important to me, at least.
Yeah, how to be natural while building this depth of practice. Yeah, let's talk about that. That's a good one to talk about. I'll put it on the list. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Mikhail, did you have one?
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? I'm
Yeah,
a
please.
beginner, right?
No worries.
The vow, is it always with your guru, or can it be also kind of to yourself? Is it like just just to get that?
In our tradition, initially you get it from someone that you're taking as a guru, and then afterwards you can renew and revive it by yourself. But there are traditions where you take it by yourself. There is also traditions for that. In our tradition, usually we want what's called the blessing of the lineage. So we want the transmission from the unbroken oral tradition from Buddha Shakyamuni to our own teachers because there's added power and added sort of support in that. And also there's ways that you can do by yourself as well. So at this stage, it's like use it as a training and as a practice. And then when you feel a connection to a guru, you can request these vows on their own, or else they come together with a lower tantric empowerment, just automatically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I'll talk more about ways to take the vows and what the implications of that are as well. I'll put that on the list. Thank you so much, everyone.
And
Oh, sorry.
regarding the PDF of the vows, they should be out by mail from Tara. Tara writes it was sent this morning by mail. If you didn't get it, they will be resent, including with the link to the videos. We will try to get it up uh, as soon as possible, so we can review the video, and also for new people, because somebody said they couldn't be here and they wanted to just watch the videos. So obviously we'll do our best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just, as your thought project for the week, just try and identify what self-cherishing is like when it's really emphasized in your daily life, when it's really up. Before even trying to do anything about it, identify it. What is it like? Physically, verbally, mentally, what is self-cherishing like? So just kind of have that in your mind as your thought project for the week. And it's just a quiet exercise that you can have taken along back there just as you do your normal work and whatever. So should you choose to accept it, that is your mission. And we'll go ahead and dedicate. Jancho semcho rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyu chi ke panyam pa me pa yang gone gondu kawa sho Toni dawa rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyu chi ke panyam pa me pa yang gone gondu kawa sho. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you